Welcome to Purpose-Driven Sobriety. I'm Christine, and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Purpose-Driven Sobriety podcast, where you can find us anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And please find us on Facebook and give us a follow. We are here today with a gentleman that I met through the intranet. On one of the recovery pages. I just enjoyed some of his shares, and we got to chitty-chatting through messaging, and I invited him to be on the show today. Today's episode is sponsored by Miss Andrea Swanson. She is a dear friend of mine and a friend to all of us in recovery. And so, Andrea, God bless you, and thank you so much for sponsoring this episode. So, Ron, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christine. I thought maybe you wanted to invite me because of my Midwestern accent, but I wasn't quite
there
sure.
You go, because you're in Michigan, right?
I am in Michigan, so yes, and
awesome.
And you're in Texas, so we're coming together.
Let's compare the weather. How's the weather there?
Actually, it's going to be beautiful today. It's going to be in the mid-60s, so we're very happy here in Michigan. So West Michigan, actually, I'm on the West Coast, so we call this the California Michigan because we're right by Lake Michigan, nice sandy beaches.
Oh, so, beautiful.
Beautiful here, just like in Texas, I'm sure.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, just as I came into the studio, it was mid-60s, so we're pulling out the shorts and getting ready for the weather to change. So on this show, we just share our stories, experience, strength, and hope. And I started this after I've just dealt with so many people that are still living in shame, through alcoholism and addiction. And no shame here. I try to live my recovery out loud, and I just love other people that do that. And so I like I said, I think that's what drew me to you. So the floor is yours, sir. Tell me all about what happened, what it was like, and what you're like now.
Sure, Christine. So thanks. My name is Ron, recovering alcoholic addict. So I always like to kind of tell my story, and I appreciate that. I mean, I love to tell my story because every time I tell my story, it defeats the shame and guilt part of it, because what kept me sick for the longest time was I kept it all to myself. Mm. And I probably knew I had a problem for at least a couple of years before before I hit my bottom and before I got into this program, 12-step recovery program. And so every time I tell my story, it helps, I think, get rid of that shame and guilt. And it's pretty much gone today, but also to help others. And that's how God speaks through me. So, Amen. So I like to usually tell you a little bit about, and feel free to interrupt me, because I usually take about 3 breaths per hour. And I got that from my mother, but, and so hopefully I don't do that too much, but, so I'm one of 7, 3 brothers and 3 sisters. Grew up on the east side of Michigan, and my dad was a bricklayer contractor. My mom stayed at home. My dad worked very hard. I'm from Polish. Both my parents are Polish, and my dad worked hard and he drank hard, and so he had this disease of alcoholism. But as a kid growing up, so I was the second youngest. I do have a baby sister. But so growing up in the 70s, so, I didn't really realize too much about, it was a really nice, growing up. We grew up on 20 acres and down there. So we had a lot of fun growing up in the 70s, a lot different than today. We didn't have smartphones, and we had 3 channels, TV channels. So you're outside just having a lot of fun. And I just remember just having a lot of fun outside. And I don't remember drinking a whole lot with my dad drinking much. But there was one of those time frames that, as many of us have, that changed for me. And I was 11 years old, and we used to go on the job site every so often to help my dad out. And I remember he tried to stop drinking one of these times, and he had a seizure. He had a seizure on the job site, the DT seizure. And I just remember as a kid, just and the ambulance came, and that time it just my whole life changed as a kid. And I just remember being just really scared. I just started to worry as a kid. I just remember just like, wow, the whole mortality chance of a parent dying was just, it struck me as a kid. And I remember like a couple days after that, he was getting hallucinations. I remember him coming down from the bathroom and he was like circling somebody. I think he was seeing something. And I just remember just being so shocked as a kid. I was like, wow, this is just the craziest thing. And ever since then, I just remember being afraid, just being afraid as a young person. So, that was a time from just two time frames of just a happy kid to just being worried.
Now, did you know at the time that it was alcohol related, or did you just think he was sick?
That's a good question. So I think I knew it was deep down, but so this was 1977. So being 11, I don't, that's a good question. I don't really know, but I think I knew he was going to try to stop. He was trying to stop drinking. So I just remember being really afraid of it. And, so moving on from there, 1978, if many of people who are listening in are a little bit older, economically, times are really tough. As a contractor, builder, bricklayer, double-digit inflation, double-digit, interest rates. People weren't building back then. So my dad got out of the contracting business and decided to buy a trailer park, gas station, liquor store.
Oh, wow.
On that west side. And that makes a lot of sense for an alcoholic, we four of us kids, three of the older kids stayed back in the Detroit area, and we moved up to Whitehall area. Whitehall, Michigan is where I live, which is on the West Coast. And going into the seventh grade, it was just really tough as it is, moving, leaving all my friends. If you guys remember with being 12, 13 years old, how tough it was. And, I remember many a times, my dad trying to stop drinking, on his own. He had went in a couple of times to dry out. Same ordeal, of DTs. My brother driving him to treatment and having DTs and off and on. And if any of you listening in have been part of an alcoholic family, just a constant yelling. He was never physically abusive to my mother, but just a constant, yelling and the broken record of just saying stuff over and over. And whatever his hangups were growing up as a young Polish immigrant, my dad didn't immigrate here, but his mother did. He never met his dad. His dad, when he was 6 weeks old, he was one of 11. His dad went back to Poland when he was 6 weeks old. He was the youngest, so he never met his dad.
Wow.
And his mom actually died in his arms when falling down the steps when he was 27. So he had his own issues growing up, and he had some other issues that he would bring up every time he was drinking. His own hang-ups, and you would hear that all the time, every time he drank. And so you just heard that over and over. And my mom had left a couple of times and came back, and my other older siblings that were with us had to deal with all that too, and then having a liquor store and having to kind of do the gas station, and I just remember as a teenager just being so ashamed of all that, because I figured everyone knew my dad drank, and I'm sure people knew it was. And I remember thinking, being 13, 14, having to say being at the store, just starting to feel less, than everyone else, just being ashamed of the whole family situation. And it was just very difficult. I mean, anyone listens, just being part of that dysfunctional family, and my mom having to go through all that. So yeah, it was just very difficult. And then again, moving in a new place, just trying to fit in, at that time. So I think it was a little bit harder on my brother, who was 2 years older than me. he rebelled more. He was more the rebellious one. I was just trying to kind of, I wasn't necessarily the lost child. And many of you know what the whole dynamics of all that was. But so anyway, so back and forth going through that. We were lucky. So a couple years in 1980, we were lucky is that a small convenience store chain decided to buy us out, buy the liquor store portion out. Because we couldn't handle it. So 2 years in, even with the high interest rates, they decided to buy us out. And we kept the trailer park. So thank God that happened. Not that my dad stopped drinking but it was just too difficult having the store.
Sure.
So I was 14 at the time, trying to fit in. And then at 15, I got exposed to my first mood altering chemical. So interesting enough, many of you know, or sometimes, I was brought up and still a practicing Catholic, which is an important part of my spirituality. But as many of you know, growing up as a kid, my mom, would never forget us to be able to go to mass in the morning. Sometimes, you'd always wonder, you'd be sleeping and you're thinking, oh, it's 10:20 or 10:30. Mass is always 11. She's going to forget this time, but she always came in, took the covers off, you always got it, and church as a young person can be very boring, and it's no fault. We have it, I've got 3 children myself, and sometimes, it can be I totally get it, And I had this really bad cough and cold, and I got prescribed a medicine with codeine in it called Actifed C, and I took it as prescribed. And you know what? Church was never so interesting and exciting than I ever had before. I was following along, I was singing, and the priest was saying it was so interesting, and in my mind, I thought, whatever was in that syrup, was a cure to whatever problems I had, whatever emotional pain I had going on at home, whatever feelings of insufficiency or whatever feelings of low self-esteem. If I can just get a hold of that, what's in that syrup, it's gonna be a cure-all for me. That anything with a little sleepy eye on. Because they used to give it and be like a little sleepy eye. I
remember that. Mm-hmm.
Later that year, I was also exposed to alcohol at a party, or at a friend's house, some slow gin, and I think it was 7-Up, and I got the same feeling also with that. The only thing I didn't like about alcohol so much was it made me uncoordinated, and I figured people knew, so I didn't like alcohol as much. But also at 15. 15 is that magic thing. So I just remember the feeling. I think people like us who have this disease, that is what is different. People who don't have this genetic makeup, my take on it is they don't get that same feeling. That's what it's the biochemical piece. If you talk to anyone else who gets exposed to alcohol or this disease, or get exposed to any type of mood altering chemical, whether it be, any opiate or anything like that, they don't remember their first exposure like that, where it's like a life changing event,
where it's almost romanced.
It is. People can remember. That is the thing, because some people will take it and they'll get sick. They'll get sick, or they'll get a bad adverse event. We call them. Or they'll get, the alcohol be like, it was okay. I liked it, but it was okay.
And instead of remembering if it's a substance like you're speaking of, like something with codeine or something like that, instead of remembering it made my cough go away, or it made me, we remember how it made us feel. That's, I think, where that's the part of the disease. It's like, instead of remembering if it did its job, the drug did its job, we remember how it made us feel. Yep.
Right. I talked to, I have quite a few friends in recovery, and we, I don't say we talk about that a lot, but any person I talk to is in a 12-step program, or any person I work with. People will always remember that. And I talk to normies, which, as you know, we call. They have no concept of that. They have no concept of that about being exposed, or they'll take a medicine for pain, or they'll take a benzodiazepine for anxiety, and they take they take it as prescribed.
How weird is that?
Yeah, right.
Weird.
So at 15, I found myself, starting to look in people's medicine cabinets, looking for something that had a sleepy eye, And, I had a girlfriend at the time whose dad had a bad back pain, and I found myself taking some of his stuff, other people's things, and people's cough medicines, taking them, and diverting or taking people's stuff, and it helped me deal with stuff that was going on at home because my dad was still drinking. I had my older brothers that were with us. One of them, the guy was 2 years older, was a very good athlete. He was being looked at by Division I, like University of Michigan, Michigan State, very good football player. University of Pittsburgh, Indiana. Was just an awesome athlete and got a ton of accolades. Then the brother that was older than him was going to pharmacy school, and was a pharmacist, and was a very good looking fella, almost model-like, with his looks and his smarts. And as a 15-year-old, as much as like I learned from my own kids now, is I make sure to, and my parents never my dad or my mom never gave any more accolades to any one of us other than the other one. They never did. But as a teenager, it's natural, though,
sure,
to say, wow, look at, my other brothers and sisters, look how good they are, look how crappy I am, and I just found myself comparing, and I did that to other people. I mean, we grew up lower middle class, and I would see, other kids in high school on spring break were going out to Vail skiing. And then, what I got for Christmas was some corduroys, And so we didn't have a whole lot, of hand-me-downs. As you can tell, money mismanagement was an issue when you're growing up in an alcoholic home. And that all fed into the feelings of being less. So getting, some, any type of opiates, or even some, that made it all go away for whatever, 2 hours or 3 hours, or even drinking. So that made it all okay, And then I found myself trying to do well in school. I was a pretty good athlete, not like my brother, but I was always a little brother, and so as time went on, I did better, and I joined a band, so I was a musician. So that was kind of fun too. So I was in a hard rock band or rock band in high school, and I found that being a human doing did kind of help from that, instead of being a human being, I became a human doing. I did a lot of sports, I was in a hard rock band, or rock band, I guess, not hard rock band, but I guess they call it hard rock back then. Did a lot of, Judas Priest and Van Halen and Def Leppard and stuff like. There's actually some YouTube videos of it, but we can link those later.
Love it, absolutely.
But anyway, so anyways, so going through high school, I did all that kind of stuff and using on the side. No one ever knew, just some diverting. And so as I start to, I thought maybe my dad was, pretty cool. My dad was, he was drinking, but as a parent, my dad didn't want me to, he only had a 10th grade education. And what happened was he had to drop out to work on the farm. So he grew up on a farm, again, as an immigrant, or his parents were immigrants, and he had to drop out in 10th grade to work on the farm. So all of his kids, he wanted us to, have an education. So he was like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'm like, well, I think I want to be an accountant, because I was good with numbers. So then I take an accounting class, and man, that was boring. So, he then's like, well, why don't you be like your brother Dan? He's a pharmacist. And I'm like, well, I don't know, because he brought home books like this.
Oh, wow.
You probably can't see it. So
That's a door
this book right
that's a
here.
doorstop. He's
Yeah. So this book is about 3 or 4 pounds, and I'm like, wow, I don't know. This looks like a lot of work,
right.
and it looks like it is. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I want to do that, And but he's like, yeah, well, sure, you can. So I took a chemistry and biology class in high school, and I really liked it. I really liked biology, really liked chemistry. It was pretty natural at that. So, and then one of my best friends in high school was going into pharmacy, and I was like, well, if he's going to do it, then I probably can do it. And so I don't know if it was a subconscious thing to go into pharmacy because I liked opiates or I liked mood altering chemicals, or it was or it was because I liked biology or chemistry. But I decided I was going to go into pharmacy school. As when I got out, and from what my dad did, and then seeing what my brother did. So that's what I did. So I'm about 18 at this time. So I went to community college. I was, to start out, I was kind of lucky. I had fun there. I was able to play baseball there, because I did pretty well in baseball. So I got to play JUCO or junior college baseball, and that helped a lot with kind of a low self-esteem, being able to play baseball. And I did relatively well in school. I did have my first girlfriend break up with me, who she was a freshman, dating another, like a guy like 4 years younger. And that really threw me for a loop, with using and stuff and trying to use, and did a little bit of drinking, but it was hard to get, you can only, take people's stuff so much. There's only so many, filing cabinets, didn't really like marijuana that much just because it, made me paranoid. Drink a little bit, but again, it did make me do some things I wouldn't normally do, but I didn't really like it as much. But I still partied some, threw a lot of big parties. I did quit the band, primarily because, we did do some Northern Michigan stuff, with this band that I was in, and realized music full time wasn't going to be my deal because the people that were doing it were really skinny and they smoked cigarettes and they didn't have a lot of money. And I thought,
and you wanted to be the opposite of that.
And I'm like, I don't think that's going to be what I want to do. It's just, it was a lot of fun playing music, but it was like, I don't think that's going to be my lifelong thing. So anyways, I went to community college. I got a different girlfriend, and I did okay. And then I got into pharmacy school. And it was interesting with pharmacy school, you get an internship. You work at the hospital, like on weekends. And it took a bit to get into pharmacy school, but so it was interesting. So when I got into I worked as an intern. What happens is when you're in pharmacy, there's just different drugs that cause, abuse potential. C5, we call it controlled substance 5, is the least abusive. And then C2, these different C categories, C1 is the most addictive. And C1 means there's no therapeutic benefit, like something like crack cocaine or like heroin is one. C2 is like morphine. Cocaine actually, powder cocaine is C2 because we do use powder cocaine we mix it in, we use it for like eye operations, and then it can cause, it's an anesthetic. But what's interesting, I knew that because I was in pharmacy school, and then believe it or not, the second day when I was working at the hospital, I found myself looking at, these C, the ones that were labeled C, and I found myself, taking some of those.
So you were permitted even on your second day as an intern, you were permitted to, which I know nothing. I'm a mortgage banker. Ask me a mortgage question, but so even it being brand new, you still had access to those medications.
Oh, sure.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh yeah, you work. Yeah, you work. Today, nowadays, no. this is back in the 80s. So now it's much more tightly regulated. Not regulated is the word, but it's just much more, you know, really, you know, tightly with regards to how they're, you know, accounted for.
Right. Got
you
it.
know.
Got it.
But it was just crazy, just the whole compulsion and the obsession of all that, with the disease, you know. But you know, it was only like during the weekend, every other weekend, you know, it was only when I was there working. I actually do have an extra like hemivertebrae in my back, you know. And so part of the kind of the rationalization was that my back was hurting from, you know, from standing up for 8 hours, and made the pain go away. I mean, the disease will do that to us. You know, the disease will say, you know what, I got a headache, and I have this, or I'm anxious, and I'll, you know, I take this for that. And I'm not saying some of us don't have chronic pain and don't need those type of things. You know, we're not murderers.
Yeah, but we
you know,
we become very gifted at telling ourselves rational lies, so we can rationalize anything. Mm-hmm.
And that's why when we need those type of things, you know, and I was always told this, when we need those type of things, if we have a broken leg or if we have surgery, and you know we have you know stuff done, that you know someone else is in control of that, not you or I'm not the one doing that.
Right.
You know, someone else is, you know, running that show. But anyway, so in pharmacy school, I did that for a while, but it was only, you know, it was only on weekends. You know, I never took any of back to school. And that's why I told myself it was only recreational. Blah blah blah. It was only a small amount. And you know, and I did pretty well in pharmacy school. You know, I was up in a pharmacy fraternity, and my brother was in the same pharmacy fraternity, and you know, I had pretty good smarts and did really well, and things didn't progress, you know, quite yet. And then I remember this line in the sand, kind of similar. You know, every person who has this disease, I believe, remembers when you cross that line where it comes from a recreational to an everyday where you can't go back, you know, where it doesn't, you know. And that was the summer of 1988. And I decided to take some summer classes because I wanted to make my last year a little bit lighter, you know. So I decided to take some summer classes, and because where I was living was about an hour and 15 minutes from where I got my BS in pharmacy. And these summer classes were like 3-4 hours long, you know, in the summer. And so they're long, you know, and I didn't want to be bored. So I decided, well, you know, how you not be bored is by, you know, you take that you got a little buzz on, you know. So I decided to, you know, have some opiates or whatever for, you know, so I could enjoy the class a little bit better, you know, because I don't like to be bored. And so that's what I was doing. So a couple of days a week, I was, you know, started to take some during that time. And then when fall came around, I tried to go back to just recreational, and I couldn't. I got very depressed. I remember there was a little bit of withdrawal. I just found myself really out of it. And I found myself, like, during the week going back to the hospital, making excuses to go back to the hospital to take some meds and come back, you know. And how scary that was, in a sense, you know, and having to come back for a day and then stealing something, coming back, you know. And that's where I found myself having to bring back stuff, you know, to get through during the week. And that was that line I crossed. I couldn't go back to just every other weekend using some and then just, you know, trying to go. And then the powerlessness kicked in. I just remember the powerlessness feeling the shame, just like thinking, wow, you know, this is out of control. So at that time I was 21, maybe. 21 at the time. So, you know, I did that for a while and just going back and forth. I remember I went on clinicals, Grand Rapids, and doing some of that. I did really well on clinicals. I mean, even though I was using, and it was I got some accolades for how well I was doing. And then spring came. And I remember telling myself, you know what? I can't see myself being 50 years old and working as a pharmacist and using every day. I just can't. It just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to quit, like white knuckling it. And but I started drinking more. I started drinking more. I remember doing some partying, more drinking. Just basically using another addiction, that happens to us.
So let's pause there, because there nothing, of course, I'm 11 years into this gig, and nothing. It took me a minute coming in here to recognize, how I don't want to use the word silly, because that is not proper. But when sitting at a table in a recovery meeting, and someone says, well, I quit drinking 3 years ago, I just smoke weed now. And it's just like, okay, mind altering is mind altering is mind altering is mind altering. A rose by any other name still gets you high. It's people, don't fool yourself to think that you can substitute one mind altering for the other mind altering. It don't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And you are fooling yourself. If you have a family member, they're just doing it. It's just a matter of time until they're right back to what we call drug of choice is. It's just a matter of time. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Sorry, I wanted to put that distinction out there for people that think, well, I'm not doing this, but I'm just doing this. And it's like, okay, there's another rational lies. That's another, you're rationalizing using a mind-altering substance. Anyway, I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about when I get into treatment and how the light bulb went on in regards to that. But to your point is, it's the part of the brain that actually causes that mood altering. I mean, it's the same part of the brain, that is the fight, flight, flirt, spot. It's the 4 F's.
The
limbrick and food.
Isn't that the?
Yeah,
see?
You got it.
Yeah, I'm smart.
You got it. You're on top of it. You're on top of it.
Yeah, don't be impressed.
Don't be impressed. And then some people say, "What about caffeine? What about nicotine?" Well, the thing is, though, is caffeine doesn't make me like sell my home or whatever. It doesn't make me sell my TV, or it doesn't make me rob a bank. And nicotine doesn't make me. There's no data that suggests those mood altering chemicals do that.
Right.
But people will jump in a car that are on THC, or people, some of those other things, that kind of cause that, so there's data behind that.
Right.
And as you know, that is highly controversial on some, social media sites about people who smoke weed. And, for me, I'm going to tell you what, my recovery is way too precious for me to start fooling around with doing something like that, because what I'll do again, and I know my past, is if I've lost both parents since I've been in recovery, and the only way around is through it.
Right.
And if I smoke some weed to deal with the emotional pain of that, that's just like me when I was 17, 18, 15.
Not wanting to be bored.
Right. So I don't really need to do that. And I'll go toe to toe a little bit with some of the marijuana maintenance program folks, just for a while, just for some entertainment. And then I'll say, a day at a time, this is where I'm at, and I'm just going to stick with that. I don't want my ego to get too big, because, ego will, the halo from here to here is only 6 inches.
That's exactly right.
So
around your neck. And then it's choking.
Yeah, I don't really want to get there too much with, look how great I am, because I was not what got me to be here. So absolutely. I have to be real careful. I have to be really careful with the ego piece of all that. But anyway, so back to springtime, I was able to kind of spring 1989. I was able to at least get off the narcotics, and I remember leaving the hospital, not taking it, and just being so proud of myself, white knuckle. Not doing it, drinking a little bit more. And then I think it was, I don't know the exact day in May, but, I had this, I was at the fraternity. I had a little brother, that was, we had these, if anyone's been at fraternity ashore, we have these little brothers, little sisters. And this guy was his parents owned multiple pharmacies in Michigan, and he was in pre-pharmacy. He was going to try to get in pharmacy school, but I believe he had our disease, and he partied a lot. But he was telling everyone he was getting pharmacy school, and I thought, well, this guy must be pretty smart. But he partied like some of us older guys who already were in pharmacy school. And I remember I was working, and I got a call at the hospital that they found him in the basement. He had hung himself.
Oh, wow.
Because he was not getting into pharmacy school, and the jig was up that he was failing out, and he was going to have to tell his parents, and the shame was too much, and that he hung himself. And of course, once I got that news, I just went back to using again, because I just couldn't deal with the emotional pain of all of that. And of course, I had no support, I had no program. And I just remember, and I started right back where I was, at that time I was probably taking, 6 or 8 pills a day. I was 8 at a time. I was probably up now like 13, 14 pills. I mean, the tolerance goes up, and I just remember going back to whatever. So I graduated, and they didn't have a spot for me at the hospital, because the hospital is only so many spots, and so then I got a job at one of the retail stores, as a kind of a retail pharmacist, a graduate pharmacist. So I got lucky in a way. They never, at the hospital, they never caught me. I never found out, even though stuff was going, was missing. And I'm sure that I was there for a couple of years, and I'm sure, but just their ability, thank God. I mean, it is what it is, but it kept me sick. And so as a graduate pharmacist, they usually they'll try to find you a store, but they have you work at all these different spots. And I remember going to all these different spots and diverting from there. And at the time, I started having some trouble with my girlfriend at the time. So the emotional pain made it worse. And then I found myself going from a Schedule 3 narcotic just to more the Schedule 2 narcotics, which gets you more and more trouble. If you get caught. And I just, because the Schedule 3s didn't really give me how I was feeling. And at the time, I only felt good about 20 minutes in the morning. It's called Chasing the Dragon.
Yeah.
And I was almost like Elvis. I was starting to become like Elvis, something get me up in the morning, and something get me sleeping at night. And I just remember just being so much emotional pain with my girlfriend at the time. And it was just really tough.
So did anyone know at the time, anyone in your family have any suspicion, or did the girlfriend have any suspicion at that time, or were you just living in it by yourself?
I think maybe a few people, one of my friends said he thought, he hadn't seen me in a while. He thought something was off, and I just remember a couple of times just almost being the point of telling my girlfriend, because I was, feeling so much shame, but that shame kept me just so here. And the disease also tells you to keep it in, and then, I'm going to quit tomorrow, know. And I remember a couple of times, and then I finally got my own store in my hometown, for in November. This is November 1989. I got my own store. And I remember a couple of times just not going to do it, it's not going to use, and then by 1 o'clock, they're using again, and I'm going to quit. I'll quit tomorrow. And I just remember being in so much pain, and I just, at this time, so I'm up to using 30 pills a day of Norcos and Tylox and Percodans, and these are pills. I drink up some, but not a lot. Often I like partying some with my friends, but not a lot. And then taking something to fall asleep, and then maybe some amphetamines to, just diet pills to get up. And I just remember just feeling like crap. And I'm 23 at the time, and just feeling so much like my body is I feel like I was probably 50. And I'm 56 now, so I feel pretty good. But I was feeling like I was 50 like that. And just thinking maybe I should leave this job because they're going to find out. then try another job, try to find and try to start new again. And I remember like right around Christmas time, and I remember just crying out to God, please, save me. It was just, it was horrible.
Where were you when that happened? Were you at work?
I was like, I was in bed. I was in bed. I was like in bed, and you know what? God did. He did. He did. And about 2 weeks later, he did. He sent some angels, but they weren't the angels in a biblical sense.
Mm.
These angels had a little like red things on top of their cars.
Oh.
And they had these little things with bracelets.
Oh, beautiful silver bracelets, I'm assuming. Yeah. Oh, dear.
Yeah,
Okay.
So, and it wasn't the angels I was expecting, but they were the angels.
The angels you needed.
So, yeah, January 10th, 1990, I went into work, and I pulled in, and I saw this security car. And it had this license plate from the headquarters from the pharmacy I worked, and I knew it was over. I knew it was over. And I walked into work, and this pharmacy was already open, and there was a guy there, and he says, "You're in trouble." And I said, "I know." And so
how did you feel in that moment? Was there a relief? I mean, probably there had to be a degree of fear, of I would imagine. But did you feel? How did you feel in that moment when he said you're in trouble?
I felt a ton of relief. Yeah, I was a little bit nervous. I was scared, but then I just remember thinking the lie is over. I felt like so much relief, like you say. It was like, oh my gosh. But I did not realize how much trouble I really was in. I really did not know. And the guy was like, "Tell us everything, and then we'll go easy on you." So I basically told him everything. I told him everything what happened, and all I was diverting, and unfortunately, I come to find out because I was, working all these different stores, there was other people that were taking things, and I got blamed for all these other things.
Oh, wow.
So long and short of it is, they let me go home, believe it or not. And I remember going home, and I wrote this long letter to my parents and then my girlfriend about everything that was going on. This was like at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and everyone else was at work, and my parents were, gone doing stuff. And I still have the letter sitting over there, and I read it. And it's actually pretty difficult to read, still even to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, telling them all what's going on. It was just a big shock, and the next day, they let me go home. Actually, I'm surprised. And then the next day, the police came and got me. They took me down to the county jail and to arraign me. And what was interesting is that they had another person that they were arraigning, like this, for a crystal meth lab. So the news was there, the local news was there to catch them, but they got like a bonus.
Oh.
So they got the bonus, and it was interesting. I didn't think that they were recording because I figured they'd have to have that red light was on. So, they arraigned me, and then I got put up in the third floor of the county building. And I remember sitting up there with 11 of my closest friends on the third floor, and I was on this 1/4-inch mattress of, with no box spring, starting to go through withdrawals, and then seeing myself on the 6 o'clock news on the Grand Rapids, and that was the lowest point. That was the lowest point, just thinking, what the hell? And then all my friends thought that was the greatest. They thought, oh my gosh, you're a star. Look at you, you're a star, and all that type of stuff. And then the toilet was a stainless steel toilet. There's no barriers. Everyone gets to watch you go, and I used the toilet without putting, toilet paper on it. And they thought that was the funniest thing. Cause, I was just a guy, there. And I thought, oh my gosh, my whole life was ruined, and it was like it was just horrible. It was just it was the craziest, most surreal. And I got rung up on, I thought it was 6 different felony counts. There was actually 2 counts with 3 different things, but and the prosecutor at the time was a guy who was on 60 Minutes because he prosecuted a attorney that had this disease, but she was pregnant with cocaine. So he loved to be on TV. So he was very excited to get a white collar fella. And so he, was very excited to get me, because he wanted to get everybody, So anyway, so it was very difficult. It took me about 25 days to actually get out of jail to go to treatment. And I remember talking to this woman that, was saying her name was Marlene. She was from Pharmacist Help and Pharmacist, and she was great because we talked. And they got me hooked up, and she was like, she goes, you'll never be able to drink again. And I'm like, and I remember thinking in my mind, it's like, why are you telling me this? Alcohol didn't end me up in jail. I'm thinking to myself, when I get married, if I want to have a drink, I'm going to have to drink. But I didn't tell her that. And so I don't want this all to be a drunk-a-log because we've got a little bit short on time. But anyways, I want to speed this up a little bit. So I was able to get out. I had to plead guilty to, whatever. It seemed like 6 counts, but it was like 2 counts with 3 things under it. I got to go to a treatment place in Grand Rapids for healthcare professionals. It was long-term care. And I just remember thinking my whole career was done, and I remember the physician there. And this was designed after a place called Talbot in Atlanta, which is for healthcare professionals. Had a 93% success rate over 5 years if you complete the program. And he told me, he's like, he goes, yeah, you'll be able to go back to practice someday if you do what you do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because people kept telling me that, you're asked forever,
Well, yeah, you would think.
No one wanted junkie pharmacists to ever work for him, and I just felt emotionally. And one of the God things that ever happened in my life is, I was taking 30 some pills a day and, for multiple years. And I thought my whole labs, my liver and all these things would be messed up. And, I got my labs back and everything was normal.
Wow.
Which was one of those God things. I thought, God is working in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was great. I was able to go to long-term treatment. Unfortunately, because I didn't say alcohol was my primary drug, none of that was covered. So it cost $20,000 back in 1990 for treatment back then.
Wow.
And my parents loaned me the money. They weren't rich people, but they loaned me the money. Thank God. But I remember I was so afraid of just the cost of things, because I had other lawyer bills. And I remember my first sponsor said to me, which was awesome, because I was just so worried about the money aspect. Because, growing up with not a lot of money, money was always an issue.
Sure.
And he said to me, he says, you know what? Bills will get paid, And I remember that just set me at ease. So that's what when I work with sponsors, I tell people that. So I got out of treatment, 3 weeks later, I got a job, at the nursery, which is about 300 yards from where I got busted.
So were you nursery, just real quick, Ron? Were you offered treatment in lieu of jail time, or was that the type of bargain, or?
No bargain. No. So I was going to go to treatment no matter what. So I ended up having to get sentenced anyways. So I got to go to treatment. Then after treatment, I was going to get sentenced. So I got sentenced 6 months jail, 6 months halfway house. So I got out working at the nursery. Thanks for clarifying that. I don't want to kind of skip the important parts. 6 months of jail, and then I worked at the nursery pushing the lawnmower, digging ditches, 300 yards from where I got busted. So I got to drive by where I got busted in my hometown.
Wow.
Where it was on the news and it was on the newspaper, and then people would drive by and say, hey, how's that education working out for you? So I got to deal with shame right away. I got to deal with that stuff, and that was not easy. It was not easy. But again, the only way around is through it. And I remember, I first got out of treatment, I did a 4-step right away. I did a 5th step within right away too. Got into the steps. That first year, I lost, so I got my license got suspended. It didn't get revoked. They wanted to revoke it because they're like, hey, this guy, we don't know if he'll ever be able to practice again. And then they said, this dude's got the best treatment available. Let's not revoke it. Because trying to get him back after getting revoked is much tougher than being suspended. And
that's amazing.
But see, by doing doing the next right thing, urines, doing the next right thing, back then, tells you that good things will happen by doing the next right thing. So I was grateful that it was not revoked. So for 2 years, I did that. I mean, I started making amends. One of the pharmacies I worked with, the independent pharmacies I worked, and I stole from this guy. I started doing some 9-step stuff with him, and that was tough because I had to go in there probably 18 months sober. And I went in there. This was like one of these old Miss America actually worked there, 1964. Nancy Ann Fleming. If you look back, she was married to the guy who did the Newlywed Game.
Mm-hmm.
She worked there. So this is a place where you had like a diner and an old pharmacy. And this older fellow was just so, in our active addiction, we do stuff to people. And this guy was just so hurt that I would steal from him, and which I get, but I went in there to make amends, financial and personal amends, and I paid him like $20 a month because that's all I could make. I started out making $4.25 an hour and then $6.50 because I was a supervisor of the law school, I'm making $25 an hour to making $6.50 an hour, but when I walked into this place, you could hear, it all stopped. You could hear like a pin drop.
Oh, wow.
Because, they all kind of knew I was there. But, talk about ego deflation.
Yeah.
Those 8th and 9th step, is ego deflation. But, I knew I had to do it.
You just don't know how it's going to be received. Are they going to, verbally whip you or are they, that is the scary part about doing the steps and especially the 9th step, because you just never know how that's going to be received. So yeah, that humility, I can't imagine walking through the door. And if it's anything like it is today, the pharmacy itself is in the very back of, you have to like do a walk, to get back there. So yeah, I can just envision that.
So, so I did that. I mean, I did early and I paid him back. I mean, it was $20 a month. So every month I'd walk in there and pay him $20 because there was no Venmo back then, so everything was,
you had to deliver.
So let me tell you the miracle about that. So when I got my license back, and I don't want to fast forward too much, but I think it's an important part because I don't want this to be a drunk-a-log or a use-a-log. So about 3 years after that, Bob developed cancer, prostate cancer, and my brother, he needed someone to cover for him. And my brother's like, hey, Ron's back working. Are you okay for him to cover some of those hours? And Bob's like, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Full circle.
Right. So I had never thought I'd ever work in my hometown again. So that is a miracle of the 9th step.
That's a miracle. That's
the miracle of staying sober. Think if someone was on the front page of your local paper of a town of about 5,000 to 8,000, And interesting enough, when I started working back again, of all that working, I worked 12 years behind the bench, which means in the pharmacy, and even in Muskegon, and kind of only one person ever recognized me. Of all the thousands of people I took care of, and they recognized me, except that prosecutor I was telling you.
Mm-hmm.
He actually came into one of the pharmacies where I was working and recognized me, and his eyes got so big. He like transferred his prescription. It made me laugh so hard. But anyway, so a couple other really good things I want to kind of share because I don't want us to run over too long, and because there's so many good things. So once I got out of the halfway house, I met my wife, who I had met from my other girlfriend from church. I knew her from church, and we started dating. And about a year later, she ended up getting into the program also, and she had seen how happy I was after going to meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and she has gotten the program, and she just celebrated 31 years
Oh,
in the
wow.
program.
Congratulations to her.
You know, and so I got my license back. I remember it was difficult. I remember telling my story to a lot of different people. You know, some of them just wanted to hear my story, and I don't think I would want to offer me a job. They were just interested. I remember it got tough, you know, because it took a while. People didn't really want to. And I remember praying. You know, we have some novena prayers in the Catholic religion. And I remember the ninth day, I got a call, you know, and actually a pharmacist ended up having an event. It was like an angina event, and they needed someone to fill in. And so they called me. And that guy had never had an event like that ever again.
Oh, wow.
And talk about, yeah, it was really weird. His name was Bill R. I don't give it. He has since passed away. And talk about, it was, I mean, a miracle of prayer. I always be careful about praying for certain things because you never know. You know, I'm a little bit nervous about that. But so the long and short of it is I worked 12 years behind the bench. I never had, I never had an urge as of today to use when I was working behind there. About 10 years after working, I decided I wanted to do more than work behind the bench. So I decided to go back to school to get my doctorate. And I remember getting the application to go back to graduate school, and it said, I never have you ever been convicted of a felony, so I threw it away. I threw the application away, because I was full of shame.
Mm-hmm.
And then I talked to some people, and I said, you know what, I'm going to wear this as a badge of honor, this recovery. So I got the application again, and I get it, and I filled it out, and I told my story. I told my story, and it was through the University of Washington. And they accepted me, and the whole idea of a felony was more about like with people with like child abuse or those perpetrators.
Violence.
It had nothing to do with addiction, So I got my doctorate in pharmacy, and there was a lot of fear there, just a fear of inadequacy. Again, those old tapes of can I do it? Am I smart enough? And so I've had to do that many a times, and with getting this job. So I've got this job now where I work at research and development, medical affairs. And these type of jobs you get here is you apply for them. And then once you get the job, then they do a background check, and I've had this all set. They offer you the job. And then I tell them before the background check, hey, by the way, I'm in recovery, and this is my story, and people love brutal honesty.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They love, but I had to wait. I remember I got this first job, and they're like, well, let's do the background check. Let's see what comes out of it. And then, and I had to wait like 2 weeks of that type of stuff.
And you're telling yourself all kinds of things during that, right?
Oh my God, it was horrible. So a couple of really good things I wanted to say, and you've been great. And sometimes I don't like when I tell my full story because it gets too much into the drunk along. But so, as of today, so I've gotten these wonderful jobs, and, I have a wonderful wife and 3 young kids, but I just, I love, I go to meetings today. I still work with others. I tell this story, I work a spiritual and my religion is an important part of my spirituality. I work with others just to let them know the things I've gone through, and that this too shall pass, and that everything is recoverable as long as I don't take that first drink or drug. And like I do a lot with social media like you do, and just kind of share those things with people. And like I'm working with a young fella now. He's always my age, so yeah, he's a young fella. But yeah, a young fella in recovery, and the shame piece will really keep us sick, and we're always sick as our secrets,
right?
And that people love honesty, and then like I told when I got my first job working in the pharmacy, is that you can get a urine drop from me anytime, and you'll always know where I'm at, with regards to, and I'm so happy to be working. Not everyone is like that,
Right. Right.
And working the steps is really, really important, and I work them as willing as a dying could. And I needed what I needed to get here. My story is a little bit different. And I remember being a little bit mad at the sense that some people didn't get the same bottom I did. But I remember my first sponsor said, you know what, it's going to help you in your long-term recovery, going through what you went through.
Well, and even more than that, the amount of people that you will never know how much your story has affected other people, whether it be telling it to someone you're sitting on an airplane with and just chitty chatting, or in a forum like this, that you will never know what. And again, my higher power, who I choose to call God, you'll never know what God is going to do with that. And that's one of the motivations behind this podcast. And I was talking with Rogue Media here where I record the other day, and I said, okay, so now you're supposed to have 3 shows out before your ranking and all this, and instantly, Ron, God was like, I am responsible for the results, not you. It's not about you. And so that's been a big thing that God's going to use this, how God's going to use this, as long as I stay out of the way and am just willing, and so you telling your story, we just never know how far reaching that's going to be. So just telling the truth all the time, and it's just, I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, like you say, it is a selfish program in the sense when we tell our story, it helps us. So I try to tell people we work with, and so I appreciate every time you do it. And I remember my sponsor telling me, and I still, my sponsor's just like, when someone asks you to do something for someone else, just say yes first. Mm-hmm. And then if you can't somehow, then try to work around it, but just do it, whether any type of self-service, that type of stuff, because you never know how well it's going to help others. Because other people did that for me. So I appreciate your opportunity. And like when you were asking for folks to do it, because not everyone has that. I want to say that gift is not ready yet,
right?
To do that. And the other thing I want to add before we cut her off, any other thoughts you have, is that with my children. So I have a son that's 20, a daughter that's 17, and then one that will be 16. And so we had told them all our stories in a more of a Reader Digest, because they all have the genetic makeup for it, and we talk about these things a lot. They know about meetings, and my one daughter just went to an open meeting this month and got to hear a story.
That's amazing. I suggest that for all family members that are willing to look inside of our world. Man, it's my husband loves going to conferences. Loves going to meetings. I mean, he gets something out of it every single time. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it's cool. My oldest son, it's funny. And I'm not an addiction specialist or anything like that. I mean, I've done a fair amount of work looking into it just because of my scientific background, and I've done a fair amount. And it might be something when I'm done doing this gig, I was thinking about going into like some type of, counseling, stuff like that. But you can, if you have kids, you can kind of see some similarities you don't know, but the seed is planted, so we're trying to break that cycle. I grew up in a dysfunctional home. My wife's, grandparents have the disease and, had the disease. And so we're just trying to do the best we can. And the other great advice that I heard was early on is that, my kids have their own higher power. Mm-hmm. I think that I am their higher power in a way, but they have their own higher power.
They do. And they have their own path. And that's because we too, between Rick and I, we've got 5 kids, and the oldest is 35 and the youngest is 25. And so I mean, to see that to see that they have their own path the same exact way I had mine, and had someone stood in God's way of reaching me when he did on March 14th, 2012, that would have robbed me from the experiences that I've had that have led me to where I am. So I get it, man. With those kids, it's like sometimes it's got to be hands off, because the experiences now that some people would think were my worst experiences are my best.
Right.
There is a gratitude. There's a gratitude for those awful, horrible nightmare times that you can't describe. And without them, I wouldn't be where I am. So yeah, that's one of the things where you can only do what you can do. You can, you can talk about the history, you can talk about the physiological, genetic makeup that of the three of you, one of you is in trouble statistically. That's just what history tells us. It doesn't have to be that way, and you can educate, but past that, dude, it's kind of hands off, and they're God's kids at the end of the day. He's going to do what he's going to do with them.
Well, like I tell them, I said, three things have to happen for someone to become an addict alcoholic. One, you have to have the genetic makeup. Two, you have to be exposed to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you never take a drink or a drug, you won't become an addict alcoholic. And three, over time, obviously, you need to be exposed over time. If one of those three is missing, you're not going to become an addict alcoholic. Now, with that said, if I would have never gotten into a 12-step program, and learned all the things I've learned from you people and from the fellowships and just all the things, what wisdom, I'd probably still be spinning like a devil somewhere,
or dead,
and be some dry drunk or alcohol, right?
Or dead.
So I'm grateful, and you've heard it around the table. Is this the worst thing that ever happened to me, but the best thing that ever happened to me?
Right.
And so I'm just grateful that you offer the opportunity for me to come and tell my story. Because again, every time I tell my story, it protects me. It's a shield from the shame and the guilt, and it helps me to be more of an ambassador.
That's right.
To the 12-step recovery, and I'm grateful that God's called you to kind of help continue to share this message.
Well, I got to tell you, I figured out, is early on in my sobriety, I had to be just out there, just because it was one of those things that if, everybody kept saying your secrets make you sick. And so if you were within my presence for more than 5 minutes at some point, not that I would intentionally, but somehow I would let you know that I was in recovery. And it just is such a beautiful thing when you're willing to walk around with your guts hanging out, basically, and you are one-on-one with it, even a normal person that doesn't have the disease. It's amazing the guard that is let down when they see that you're being your authentic self. It gives them the ability to be their authentic self, and that right there is a beautifully amazing connection between two human beings, in my opinion. And it's just, I feed on that. I just feed on that. So I appreciate your candor and your honesty, Ron. I think you're amazing, and I'm so glad that you're sober. Congratulations to your wife on her sobriety. And I'm just, again, thank you so much for telling your story.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to more podcasts. I'll be listening, and I hope for great success here as it grows and grows and grows, and maybe I'll get a little bit of a Waco accent. Who knows?
There you go. Have a very blessed day. Thank you so much for being on Purpose Driven Sobriety.
Sure. Thanks, Kristen.
All right. Take care, hon. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Purpose Driven Sobriety. Keep coming back.